recorded.
So today we're going to open up the February 2nd, 2021 Board of Selectmen meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Meetings of the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members or of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So today we've got, as always, starting with public comment, we've got some meeting minutes to go through, a Class 2 public hearing, and then some board discussion items, including the town manager report at the end. We're going to do a budget review, talk about a 40B proposal, and look at the contract with EA Engineering, which is the contract to remediate the property over at Grove Street, which we bought. Is it Zero Grove they call it? Anyway, okay. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Is there any public comment for this evening? I see something in. You're on mute.
How's that?
Yeah, there you go. I can hear you.
Great, thank you very much. Just a couple of quick things, and you may all be aware of this, but in case you're not, Town Clerk Kelly McGowan sent me forwarded me an email that was sent from Koppelman and Page regarding if there are changes to zoning bylaws for certain special permits. In the future, those votes may be just by a majority vote as opposed to 2/3. So I don't want to talk about all that tonight necessarily, but I just wanted to make sure that it was on your horizon such that if the planning board or others were going to make changes to the zoning bylaws, we just have to be aware of that situation where in the past it was always 2/3 majority vote to change zoning bylaws. Now it's going to be possibly still 2/3, or it may be a majority. And these things deal mostly with housing density, multifamily units, things along those lines. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that in case that stuff comes up at future town meetings.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, we did see that come over, and I know Paul is very familiar with that. I read through it, and you know, it's definitely something that we need to stay abreast of and make sure we understand going into any of the meetings what the requirements are, as well as the folks putting these things on the warrant, making sure that they understand what the requirements are as well. So,
okay,
thank you.
That was it. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other public comment? All right, with that, meeting minutes from December 15th and January 5th. I will take any comments or feedback, and if not, we can make a motion to approve those minutes. Steve or Maureen?
I'm all set. Are you set this week, Steve?
Yes. Yep. Had a chance to review them. Everything looks pretty good.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the December 15th, 2020 and the January 5th, 2020 meeting minutes. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I second the motion. Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simus, aye. That's unanimous action of the board. Thank you. And next up, we have a public hearing for a Class 2 license for 138 Milford Street. Do I need to open this as a public hearing? Yeah, okay. 7:05, we're good. So I would like to open the Class 2 license application for Weyland Foreign Motors at 138D Milford Street in Upton. Is the applicant here?
I will need to recuse myself for this hearing.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Were there any questions about this? Is this a renewal, Sandy?
It is not a renewal. It is a new Class 2 license. There was a previous Class 2 license at the same location. The owner of the property has applied for a Class 2 license. It did go through ZBA, and as you see in your notes, it was approved through that process.
Yeah, gotcha. And does it say, usually it says in here, it's not jumping out at me, the number of vehicles?
If you scroll down, there is a parking, there's a map.
I
And
see
then
the
also,
diagram.
and then also on the ZBA opinion letter
Yeah.
or determination.
Yeah. Where does it say the?
I'm just bringing it up as well.
I don't see it in the ZBA finding. All I see is the drawing, but maybe I'm just missing it.
After the drawing, 2 pages after the drawing, Brett,
Yes.
there's the ZBA's, there
Yeah,
is no,
Yes, so is there a limit on the number of vehicles that can be parked on the property, right? Because haven't we run into that as a challenge in the past where people just pile up these cars and then there's an issue with the number of cars they're allowed to have? Maybe I'm thinking of something different, but it seems like that's something that we have included in these.
we have included that in there, although the ZBA did not make that determination.
Okay, just tell me what the limit is and where I can see that, please. I'm looking as well.
There is no limit listed.
Okay, so there is no limit listed, or we don't, okay. So I don't want to approve a Class 2 unless we know what the limit on the number of vehicles on that lot is. That's just
The only thing it states, Brett, is that each space should be 162 square feet.
Right.
But that isn't going to give you the number. Is the number what's drawn on the drawing?
Yeah, and so I think however many spaces are there, right? Like if each of those is a parking space, I could pile another 30 cars on that lot, right? Just because this has a little pencil drawing of parking spaces doesn't mean that puts any limit on the number of cars that they can put on this property. So I just would like to make sure that we understand what that limit is, if there is and should be one. I'm of the opinion that there should be one, given that we've had challenges with this in the past. I don't know if there are any other opinions here. Go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to say that typically when we hold these hearings, the applicant attends these meetings to answer these types of questions, and I don't see the applicant here today.
Yeah, I don't see the applicant, and I just don't see anything in here that indicates that. So I don't know, Maureen, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think I'd go along with you. I think we should define the parking. Usually zoning defines how many spaces according to the size of the lot.
Yeah, okay. All right, so why don't we just go back to the drawing board on this one, Sandy. Is this going to present any hardship to them? I also want to make sure we're not putting them in a tough spot or a jam if they're trying to get insurances or whatever as well, so.
I haven't spoken to them since prior to the ZBA meeting, so I don't know what his business plan is.
Okay. All right, well, let them know, and if we need to try to do something to make sure that they don't end up in an unanticipated spot, we certainly are mindful of any unintended consequences. We're not trying to hurt anyone or make this difficult or be an impediment. I just want to make sure that we have it clear for the future, so.
So, Mr. Chair, I think one thing we can do, so we don't have to re-advertise, is we can just keep the hearing open and
Yeah.
table it, and then for a future meeting until we can get more of this information addressed. and then reopen the hearing at a future date. This way we don't have to re-advertise it, because that's a process in and of itself.
Yeah, and is there any way to sort of approve it so that we're not creating any impediment, but make it contingent on identifying the spaces or working with the ZBA to define the number of spaces, or should we really wait until we get that?
My recommendation would be to wait, only because I'm not sure if he's proposing 10 spaces or 100 spaces.
Okay. All right. Very good. So do we need a motion to table this?
Yes.
I would move that we table this to be reopened at a future meeting. Could that be for the next meeting if we get in touch with him so we can get that done?
Yeah, I think that's doable. A couple weeks.
So following the next meeting and then reopen the hearing. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Majority action. Thank you. And next up, we have the contract for downtown. Derek, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. I'm going to try to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here.
Well, let's wait for Steve. You're back. Okay. You can hear us okay, Steve?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay, good.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
So I hope everybody can see this okay. I have joining me today is Frank Postma. He's one of the LSPs at EA Engineering. So by way of background, the first reason why this is an agenda item, as you all know, under the Town Manager Special Act, the Town Manager needs authorization by the Board of Selectmen to execute any contract above $25,000. This contract, the proposed initial cost of this contract is approximately $20,000. You can see that on the far upper top right-hand corner, $20,740. That is the initial investment for the soil and the soil evaluation over at 0 Grove Street. So again, this is the parcel land that was acquired through town meeting action at the fall town meeting, otherwise known as the Thompson gravel lot. So during that initial process of trying to understand what the water quality and soil quality was, we found during that time that there was a little bit of petroleum contamination in the soil. So as the owner, we knew that we'd have to do some remediation work. And so again, Frank's here to answer any detailed questions relative to the work that is at hand. But you can see here, depending on which course of action we take beyond the $20,740, it could be upwards of $42,000 or it could be as low as an additional $8,000. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention because, again, the initial contract will be for $20,740, assuming that all of the, once they do the excavation of the soil and they do the analytics on the soil, if the soil comes within DEP standards, EA Engineering will file a report with DEP, and then we would have no restriction on the property. But if there were some contaminants found in the soil that exceeded DEP action levels, there would have to be a second or potentially a third approach. And so that's what I'm just trying to bring to the board's attention today. So just for the sake of this conversation, if we had to go to a second step and we wanted to just have a limited use on this property, so meaning limited use as far as no playgrounds, no residential buildings to be built on that, pretty much a parking lot or an open field, we could potentially have to expend an additional $8,000. However, if we wanted to take that even further and then try to get an unrestricted use, it could be of upwards of $42,000. So that's kind of my shorthand version of how this contract has been designed, so that you're understanding the two different approaches here. Again, a restricted use limitation or an unrestricted use would be the two potential outcomes from this this engineering contract. I'll stop there. If you have any specific detailed questions regarding how this will be operationalized, we have Frank here to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, no, this is great. Thank you for the overview, Derek, and thanks for putting all the work together. So, you know, I go back to two things. One is the town meeting and what was discussed there, as well as what our intent is for this parcel. You know, and I think in the short run, for me, it's very similar to what we did with 6 Main Street, right? It's like buy it, clean it up, seed it, and call it grass until we figure out what we need to do with it as part of the long-term vision. And I think that if that's what folks agree with, then that would allow us to spend the minimum of the $8,000, which we have to spend, put the activity use limitation in, and then if we ever want to change the use, we would have to go back and spend these additional funds up to the $42,000 to fully remediate that property, if that's what we wanted to do. If it's only ever going to be used as a parking lot or a grassy area, then we wouldn't necessarily need to spend that. The point being that we can accomplish the short-term goal of just grassing it over without hamstringing us in the future, and it allows us to save a little bit of money in the short run, which is obviously also always a good thing. The second part of this, in terms of what we talked about at town meeting, is I also want to make sure that we are not putting ourselves in a position where people can question what we talked about at town meeting, as far as you're approving a warrant article for us to buy the property and remediate it. And I don't want it to come back and have people say, hey, we gave you that money to remediate it, and it's 8 years down the road, and we're asking for some amount of money because we want to, you know, build a building on it, because that's what makes sense for the town at that point. So, you know, I'm mindful of that scenario as well. But I don't know, Steve and Maureen, what you both think, or obviously more importantly, what questions you have about what's here.
No, well, I would like to go with what we said at town meeting, what we had planned on doing it, and do the activity use limitation? Is that what y'all looking to put on that, Brett?
So go ahead, Derek.
Oh, I was just gonna just respond to Maureen's question. So, Maureen, just so the initial investment will be $20,740, and again, assuming all of the soil standards are met, we will have no restrictions on this property. But then if we exceed some of those standards, we'll have to choose another course of action, and that is to spend $8,000 and have just a restricted use, and that would be a deed restriction would be placed on that parcel, and basically would say that you can't, you know, build a playground, you can't have any residential dwelling units. Right. Or if we said, okay, no, we don't want to have a restriction on this deeded property, rather we would rather be unrestricted so we can do anything, then we'd have to spend upwards, again, you know, $42,000. And so at town meeting, what we asked to do, we asked for $50,000 so that we could remediate the property. And so remediation, in my mind, could be defined, both of those are remediated. One has a use limitation and the other one has no restrictions. But the way I believe, unless, you know, Frank could correct me if I'm wrong, both would be considered remediated.
That's correct. It's like that 100 cubic yards is the tipping point. And the approach, the first approach there is called a limited removal action. So if we're able to remove enough soil and stay underneath that 100 cubic yard volume, and meet what's called the reportable concentrations for soil, which is the most stringent soil standards that you can have, then you get a clean closure, and actually the report would just sit on Derek's desk for the next 5 years. DEP does not get notified if you've met the most stringent standards and you've kept it to below 100 cubic yards. Where it starts to take you down the MCP path is once you want to stop at that 100 cubic yards, you still have exceedances of those particular standards. Then we look at it from a risk standpoint. So is there a playground on the site? Is there a residence on the site? Is there a drinking water well on the site? All those factors play into it. And we may be able to reach using those second set of standards without an activity and use limitation. Even if those standards fail, the ones that are published in the MCP, there's something called a method 3 that allows me to actually calculate the specific risk standards for this site. So that's a third method that might get you across the finish line. And then the fourth method would be the activity and use limitation, where you'd be restricted as to what sort of uses you could have on the site.
Well, I think right now I would agree with Derek on the $20,000 estimate for now.
I think one thing that, before we render a decision, we really should understand, I see option 1A. So Frank, if you could just talk us through that a little bit, give us a better understanding what that means. I understand, I think the first line, the $9,700 plus the $11,040, underneath that I see $69 per ton. So what does that number mean, $69 per ton? And then if we look at 1A, what, I see you've got that carried out. So how do those numbers, what exactly do those numbers mean to total $37,000?
You bet, sir. So this approach 1 assumes that we're going to get right to that 100 cubic yard limit, okay? And for me to excavate out 100 cubic yards, I'm gonna have to do some preliminary things like file with the Conservation Commission, dig safe the site, characterize the soils, that sort of thing, so we can get it into a disposal facility and then actually get that approval for the disposal facility. The soil costs that are calculated there are based on excavating that soil, the cost of your excavator, putting it in a truck, and the tipping fee at the facility. So that's how you get to that $20,740. So that's the actual physical removal of the material and all the paperwork that has to go along with it, including the limited removal report. That would be after everything, if everything works out perfectly. And we're really close, when I calculate the volumes, we're really close to making that. So that's how we come up to that $20,000 mark. Okay, say I do my confirmatory samples at the extent of your excavation, and we're above the reportable concentrations, which are the most stringent ones. And then there's a second set of standards in the MCP that are called the risk-based standards. And if we're above those, there's another type of risk assessment that I can do where I'm actually crunching the numbers. So I'm taking actual distances to the nearest water body, to the nearest drinking water source area, to the nearest private well, to the nearest residence, and I can include all that information in there and adjust the standards essentially. So what are the chances for somebody who's not going to be a resident on the site to be putting a garden in there? And I can use those assumptions in order to adjust the standards. It's kind of a detailed because you have to look at various aspects of it, and maybe offline I can give you a seminar's course on the MCP, but it's to get you to a point where you get a clean closure with this more detailed, more involved set of risk assessment. And that's where the money comes from. It's a big number crunch, which would also get you across the finish line without an activity and use limitation, but it's a very paperwork intensive pathway to follow.
And that's what the $16,000 is for?
Exactly. But you wouldn't be excavating any more soils. We'd be using the numbers that we get from those excavations. You can cover up the excavation, and there's various shortcuts to tell you whether or not you could hit those numbers in the beginning. So we do like a screening level first off, and let you know, is it worth it to do the full-blown phase 1? I mean the full-blown method 3 risk assessment for 16K, or do we snap the line here and then put $8,000 on top of that 20K and get you done with the use limitation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brett and Maureen, I think that that's what we've got to be mindful of is, we know what was appropriated at town meeting. There's a significant number or amount of money that was appropriated for the cleanup of the property. So if we spend, X, which is significantly less than Y, which is what was appropriated, what happens to the rest of that money? Does it just kind of sit in an open warrant article? Do we close it out at some point in time? What do we do with that? And, are we comfortable if we don't get a, quote unquote, clean bill of health on the property? Are we satisfied with that outcome? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm trying to strike the balance between not wanting to, the fiscally conservative part of me is saying, you know what, spend as little money as possible on a piece of property that we're probably just going to end up using, packaging as part of a deal to redevelop that property all the way up to Holy Angels. And why are we going to spend money on when it's really just going to be, a parking lot? So that's on the one hand, and then the other side of me says, you know what? We went to town meeting. We told them we were going to remediate it. We got the approval and the funding to remediate it, so we should remediate it because that was the expectation we set. If this was coming back as $80,000 and we'd have to go back to the well, I'd say, all right, well, we've got an issue here. But we asked for $50,000. The estimate to fully do it at the most is less than that $50,000. So, there's some part of me that says, you know what, just to make a deal easier when we have to package this whole thing as part of some deal to redevelop downtown, if we can remove one more thing from the complexity of that negotiation, then, we probably should. But again, I could go either way on it.
And just one other thing I'd like to add to this too. In approach 2, we calculated out an additional 50 cubic yards of material. And if you notice that 16,291 is still in there for that method 3 short form, but really we'd be looking at probably half that 16 and the 5,500 if the numbers came back again with that risk assessment below the standards. So that 100 yards can be a real tipping point, so that the town fathers can make a decision as to which direction you want to go and how much more money you would like to spend, and base it off the data. I mean, it's a very difficult decision for you guys to make when I have 5 holes in the world and trying to tell you which way this thing's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's one advantage that we have is we have the ability to meet, on relatively, 48 hours, relatively short notice. So I think we have the ability to look at this step by step. We can appropriate or approve that $20,740, and then we can make an assessment or a judgment as Mr. Postma, provides us with more information and how things are looking. Again, when you approach that 100-yard number, get that information to us, then I think we can make a better judgment, a better decision as far as how we want to proceed from there. Because as you said, Mr. Chairman, there's some good reasons to look at that, from either side of that argument.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I thought we had to pick one of these and execute it, and that was that. But if we can approve the initial spend of the $20,740 and then come back and say, okay, based on what we learned from approach 1, we now know that we can either spend the $8,000 to cap it, or we can spend another $20,000 to have it be fully remediated, and we can make the decision at that point. Or we may find out that we're good to go and we don't have to spend additional money. Is that a possibility as well?
Definitely is.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's a way to operate the contract that way, then yeah, Steve, I totally agree. That would be the best way to do it.
I would totally agree with that also.
Okay, go ahead, Derek.
I think that makes good sense as long as I see Derek has something he wants to add. So go ahead, Derek.
No, I just wanted to answer your last one of your questions, Steve, relative to money left over that's in the article. Just as a general business practice, all remaining dollars that are left over in articles, we typically wait 12 months until after the project is completed. And then after that 12-month period is expired, then we close out that article, and that money then is returned back to, it's part of our free cash certification. So any money that's left over, we keep it open probably about 12 months. And then once that expired, we'll just return it back to free cash.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. Good to know in case we got into a situation where we had a restricted use and we needed to change that, to kind of give us an idea what kind of flexibility we may have with regard to that.
And just relative to that activity and use limitation too, there's no requirement for you to maintain that, an infinitum on the site. At any time, if you would decided to go back in there and take out additional soil or apply any other remedial technique that was adequate to it, we could yank that AUL off the site and it would be clean at that point too. So, even if you have the worst case scenario where, we spend the full 42,000 and you still have a restricted site, you may be, within another $20,000 of calling it clean. I really don't anticipate that in any way, shape, or form, just based on the data we found so far. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of this site is that we didn't find any groundwater contamination. So it really, that's where things get expensive, is my point. And all you do have is a soil problem here.
Good. Okay. So with that, Derek, how do you want us to motion approval of the execution of this contract?
Based upon what I heard this evening, I would make a motion to approve the initial upfront cost of $20,740.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Unless there are any other questions, I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the $20,740 initial cost to EA Engineering Science and Technology Incorporated, PPC. And Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next up, we have a 40B proposal for 27 James Road. I think Mr. Harrison is.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison here? Okay, great. Hello.
Hello.
Go ahead. Why don't you give us an overview of your project and why you're here today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can share my screen, I appreciate it. I can pull up some information.
Yeah.
Great. My name is Dean Harrison. I am the consultant for the applicant who's looking to do a small project comprehensive permit. They are looking to basically take an existing property, which is a single family home. See if I can pull it up. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. The property is located at 27 James Road. And it's an existing single-family home. I think you're all probably familiar with the location. The applicant, based on my recommendation, would like to do this as a LIP application, which is basically a process under the comprehensive permit law, where you can work with the community, and it's basically they have support within the community to go ahead and do a comprehensive permit. I'll get a little bit more detail on that shortly. But the applicant is looking to basically tear down the existing property and then make 4 lots, all 3-bedroom new construction, 3 3-bedrooms and 1 2-bedrooms on all new construction. And of that, one of the units would be affordable for families earning at or below 80% of median income. The process under a LIP application is a little different. There's two ways that you can submit, let me just keep it here, submit an application. One is to apply through Mass Housing and receive a site eligibility letter, or what do they call a site approval letter, which is the golden ticket into the ZBA for a comprehensive permit review. Or 2 is you can go through Department of Housing and Community Development, otherwise known as a DHCD, through the LIP program, where that process is a little different because we first come to the selectmen and we're requesting that an application be submitted like co-joining through the Board of Selectmen and the applicant, and that basically the Board of Selectmen have reviewed the overall proposal, that they find it acceptable, but they do not approve the application. It's more a letter of support along with the application, and we submit that to the Department of Housing and Community Development. The process, once you get the site approval letter, is similar to any other project. Because the application goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Board of Appeals actually renders the decision whether or not to issue a comprehensive permit or not. So here, what we're asking is really, and this is really just preliminary now before we make the decision to move forward with either Mass Housing or DHCD, is basically to see if you would be willing, in a sense, to basically submit an application with us to the Department of Housing and Community Development for this site approval application. And like I said earlier, it's not endorsing the project in the sense that you believe it should be approved. All it is endorsing the application that this is something you think is you like to support for the community, and then leave it up to the ZBA to say is whether or not it's a project that should be built. Some of the things I think you know, I don't know how familiar you all are with 40Bs, and I could speak basically all night, but I saw the agenda and it really doesn't go on all night. So I'm going to try to keep it quick. I just wanted to point out 2 things in the process. One is I looked up, if you can all see that, I looked up the median income for the Upton area, and you can see here it's part of what is called the HUD Metro Fair Market rent area, which contains the various towns. You can see it towards the bottom here in this area, and Upton is one of those. That the median income is basically $111,600. So if we were to build a 3-bedroom house, you usually get a family of 3 or 4 into that. So this would be the minimum income, roughly around $70,000 to $78,000 for an individual or family to make to move to be able to buy one of the affordable houses. I just finished approval in Mendon for townhomes, duplex type townhomes, and the current market value, current sale price for the affordable units is around $244. So it's affordable, but it's not, you know, it's really geared towards 3 and 4 individuals in a household. What it does do is if you want to be 2-person household, you got to show that you're not spending more than 30% of your household income towards housing, which is kind of hard to show. The other thing that you should be aware of, I also searched on Zillow, what could you find between 200 and 300,000 right now, and this is what I found on High Street, which is right around, obviously, from Town Hall, which was the only listing out of all the listings for the Upton area. Everything else was above 300. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Let's try this. Oh. It's the first time I've used GoToMeeting, so I'm a little. Oh, there we go.
While you're there, you go. So thank you for sharing all this information. I just want to make sure, Steve and Maureen, that you know where this is, right? This is James Road, which is across from Pratt Pond. It's that little fork that goes off Westboro Road. I can show you a picture if you want to orient yourself to where it is.
Yeah, it's on the right-hand side as you're going up, right before the last house that's basically at the end of the road.
I'm familiar with the road, but I am not familiar with this particular property. Based on what I'm seeing in front of me, what is the frontage? I see the drawing that you have, but what is the frontage along James Road for the parcel?
Let me see, pull that up for you again. I don't have it dimensioned out on this. It's a basic, it's in 1 inch equals 50 feet. So this was 8.5 by 11, so it's pretty correct. So that could be, it looks like each lot, this first lot here, lot 1, definitely has about, I would say, close to 300 feet. These two, obviously, I would say more around 150 or less. And I say about 300. I don't have a scale. I don't have a ruler in front of me.
Derek, can I share
Yeah.
my screen? Is there a way for me to do that?
Yeah.
I see the share screen button, but it's blacked out or grayed out.
I would find it hard to believe it to be over 600 feet. You're thinking there's over 600 feet of frontage with that one lot?
I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to scale it out, and I'll talk to the engineer to find out what exactly the distance is.
It's pretty close to 400. I don't have an architectural. Sorry, Mr. Chair, this is Paul, town planner. I'm looking at the Mass Interactive Property Map, and looks to be about 400 feet.
I mean, because ultimately what you're asking to do is build 4 individual homes on a 1 acre, basically one buildable lot is ultimately what you're asking us to do here, right? Or what you're asking us to endorse?
Correct. Under the comprehensive permit regulations, if you all aren't familiar, if a town or a community has less than 10% of its housing as deed restricted and considered affordable, an applicant has the right to go in front of the ZBA to request specific waivers from local bylaws to construct the project. What you tend to see in rural communities or suburban communities is like 2 acre zoning, 1 acre zoning, 5 acre zoning. And obviously that stops or prohibits the development of affordable housing. So the premise is, as long as you do 25% of the units affordable and you're eligible for a comprehensive permit application, you can ask for waivers from local bylaws. State laws and regulations are not waived. You cannot ask for them. So you still have to go to the Board of Health for septic. You still will have to go to Concom if there's wetlands on the property and so forth. But it's really only for local bylaws, which are considered more restrictive than what is necessary under state regulations. So yes, we're asking for 4 units to be placed on this property, which now consists of 1 single family home.
Okay. And there would only be, it looks like 1 leach field on the site?
They're looking to share the leach field at this time, yes.
So 1 leach field amongst the 4 homes.
Right.
And would there be town water on James Road, or would you need 4 individual wells?
Right now, they're showing 4 individual wells. I don't believe there's town water on that road.
Okay. I see the black dots there, but they're not
Yeah.
wells. Okay.
Yes, and obviously, like I said, we have to go through the Board of Health to make sure that the wells are done per, state requirements and that the septic system meets Title V.
Okay. All right.
Derek, can you try again I had to update some settings so that I can share my screen. Maureen, while I'm pulling this up, I don't know if you have, what questions you have.
No, I understand the process. Doesn't look like a very big lot to me.
So
The
can you guys
entire piece.
Yeah, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so this is James Road here. So these are the single house lots So most of the ones around there are, the north ones are bigger, but this is the house lot that they're talking about here. Obviously Westboro Road here, so that's the existing parcel. And
Yes.
then, yeah, and then in here you can see this is just where it is in terms of the overhead view. So that's all the land that would be cleared would be up in here, right? Would you be clearing the whole lot?
It's not the intention of the applicant to basically clear cut the lot. You know, obviously it's always great to continue with mature trees, but we're not at that exact stage yet of, you know, final location of the houses and so forth.
Have you perked any of that property to be sure that you have enough water for 4 wells?
No, we have not. This is just really the preliminary stage. As part of the comprehensive permit, with the zoning board of appeals, we would have to obviously submit a full application. And as part of that, you know, we would have to, you know, basically determine if there's enough of the soils can handle the septic and whether or not they can get 4 wells on the property. The comprehensive permit is really just a step in the whole process. Right now, we're at the very, very beginning where we're just working on a site eligibility application. And like I said, there's 2 routes. One is that we work locally with the town, get them to endorse the idea and concept here now, and then ultimately submit an application to the zoning board of appeals. They have basically 30 days to open the hearing once they get an application. Then there's 6 months of hearings. And then after that, there's a 40-day review process before they issue a permit. Once that is done, then full construction documents have to be done. They have to be done per the zoning board decision, per the state requirements. Once that's complete, and before we submit for building permits, you have to go back to the state agencies and get approval from them that you comply to all their requirements for affordability and with the documents. So, you know, we're talking at least a year out, if we're lucky.
Yeah. No,
So is the septic systems in the front of the houses?
The septic, I thought, was located on the right side.
it's a shared septic system on the
It
right.
is a shared one, or it's just the well, where the wells are?
Yes, the wells let me go by lot 1. Lot 1, the well is up in the back corner where the 3, it says 3, that black dot above it. On lot 2, it's right above the 3-bedroom also. On lot 3, it's off to the north, the northwest, yeah, kind of the northwest of the corner of the house. And on lot 4, it would be closer up to the front of the property.
Right, they've got to spread it away from the leaching field.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead, Maureen, sorry.
No, I was just gonna thank him, that's all.
Yeah. Part of this, oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so this is helpful. You know, I think that obviously we want to work with any developer or investor that's trying to put together projects like this to do what's best for them and for the community. You know, I think I have the same observation as everybody does. We're taking a single house lot and putting 4 houses on a cul-de-sac in a residential neighborhood. So it seems like an odd precedent to set. I know of lots of neighborhoods where there are cul-de-sacs and 1.5, 2 acre lots that it would be pretty peculiar if somebody said, hey, we want to take this house down, a single family house, and put 4 houses on this cul-de-sac. So, but I would like to take this away and look at it and consider the alternatives, have a couple of conversations, you know, just to try to understand what the opportunity is here to work together, to partner, to make sure that we do something that works for you guys as well as for the town. I think we're all committed to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that an actual cul-de-sac, or is it 2 long driveways that are going up there?
They're basically driveways, individual driveways going up.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, no, James Road is a cul-de-sac. James Road is a dead-end street. Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
one of the reasons I'm
Saying
seeing
was, yeah, it's a
more
cul-de-sac
and
going
more.
Hold on, Dean. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say, I understood what you were saying. It's a cul-de-sac going up into James Road, as the chairman was saying, where that's why I asked the question about frontage, because these are all going to be cutting driveways off of the same lot of land. So I think for myself, I would echo your sentiments. I'd like to take a better look at this, have some conversations offline, maybe with planning or town manager, and first and foremost, understand what that frontage looks like. And I understand the acreage is 2.6 acres. So, for myself, I'd feel a lot better if this were a larger parcel of land. If this were a 5 or 7 acre parcel, I'd be a little more, I'd be a little more enthusiastic. And then at the end of the day, we're only picking up one affordable unit. So, those are my concerns, basically. We're not really moving the needle a whole lot. And it may be a dangerous precedent. So again, I'd like to take a little bit of time to really stew on this and really consider it. And we can bring it up again.
The other issue and what I'd like to look at is the width of the driveways and how the safety equipment can get up through there, fire trucks, ambulances, or whatever. Do you know what the width of those driveways are?
No, not off the top of my head. I can find that. I'll have the engineer do some dimensional on the plans. So for next time, I admit we wanted to start the process. I think this was a good start. All great questions. As I've done these before, now it's my 30 plus years, and I've done a lot of 40Bs in Massachusetts. One of the things we do try to do is meet as many of the local requirements as possible. The ones that we do always most likely never meet is obviously, lot sizes, the density, but we really try to do road, driveways and all that to be as close to town standards as possible. Here it's a little different. They are driveways, so, we'll need to address that.
Thank
The
you.
only other thing I would to do, Paul, our town planner is here. So I don't know if you have any, initial reactions or thoughts. If not, then we can, follow up offline. Absolutely. But didn't know if you wanted to share any perspective at this point.
At this point, I think that was a very helpful introduction, I think, by Mr. Harrison. I was able to speak with him previous, to this meeting. It is a unique project being contemplated here. And again, we haven't quite seen anything like this. So I think it's wise to step back and look at it a bit further. But we also have to understand the limitations of the process as well. As Mr. Harrison described, there's certain mechanisms at the state level where the town doesn't really have a choice to accept it or not. So this process at least is slightly more collaborative. So I think it's worthwhile to study this a bit further. And, I don't know if it's next month or in a future time. I'm not sure Mr. Harrison's timetable. But I think, Mr. Harrison, at least from his words tonight, he has some experience and some willingness to work with the town. So that's encouraging. That's my first perspective. So, but I think studying this a little bit more is probably in everyone's best interest.
Great. Would that be does that work for you guys, Dean, and your client, for us to get together and say another month or so to revisit this?
Yes, and I'll talk to my client about cleaning up the site plan a little bit. I think I've seen designs, more of a cluster design on lots, this size. And maybe we could look at something like that. So you have one driveway coming out and maybe do either a turnaround. Maybe you can't do a full cul-de-sac, but do a turnaround so emergency vehicles can, get in like a hammerhead. We've done so many different ways. This is why it's collaborative. We can work together. Obviously, my sponsor, the applicants have the final say. But if we're working together, we heard what you said. I heard already what some of the comments were. So let us take a look at it and see.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the time, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time also. Have a great evening.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yep, you as well.
All right, next up, we've got a budget review. Derek?
Good evening. So as you all recall, at our last meeting, Kenny and I presented the recommendation for the FY22 operating budget. So we wanted to spend as much time as possible, which is why we slated one specific meeting for that purpose. So starting this evening, we have a number of our department heads who are here to present their specific detailed line item budgets before you, answer any questions that you may have. And then we'll do it again at a follow-up board meeting for the second half of the boards, the departments that report to the Board of Selectmen. So without any pending questions, we were going to start with Chief Bradley, then move to Chief DeFranco thereafter.
Great, thanks. Hey, Chief.
Good evening.
Okay. I assume you have the budget sheets in front of you. I'm going to be talking about page 71 through 75 for your reference.
Got it.
Okay, as an overview, the total recommended FY22 budget that I'm recommending for police and communications is 1,850,767, which is a reduction of $1,982 from the fiscal 2021 amount of 1,852,749. In this budget, what's included is a 0.5% increase in wages as required by the CBA, and a 1.5% increase for one non-union employee. The FY22 to 24 collective bargaining agreement is scheduled for negotiation, which I believe will start next month. So those figures or anything that is negotiated in that contract is not included in this budget and would have to be added at a future date. Step increases that are in the current CBA are included in this budget. And fortunately, the ability to use increased grant fundings and wage reimbursements allow this budget to be below the funding requests for FY20 and FY21. So next, an overview on expenses. Proposed expense budget is decreased by $10,300, and that is a result of the following. A replacement cruiser line item was decreased by $10,000. If you recall, in FY21, we had in the budget the purchase of a four-wheel drive pickup truck for the department. So for this year, we're going back to replacing an SUV, which is a reduction in that line item of about $10,000. There's a decrease in expenses of $1,500 due to a consolidation of photocopier expenses, and I believe that has been transferred to the technology budget. And the only increase that you'll find in expenses is in police utilities. The cable internet item has been increased by $1,200 to facilitate an increase in download upload speed to manage the amount of data and video that we're currently using with body cams and cloud sharing of evidence. Questions so far?
Great work. No, just saying.
The revenue budget. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was saying
Okay.
no questions so far was what I was saying.
Great. Okay, the revenue budget, which is pretty much stays the same. There's an increase in 911 support incentive grant funding, which is used to offset some wages in dispatch. We still have the training grant, also some regional 911 fees from Hopedale, Mendon Upton contribution to the school resource officer, and also the BBT contribution to the school resource officer position. Now I can get into some details in wages and expenses if you'd like me to, but they're pretty much straightforward from the last 2 years. The challenging part, matching up individual wages for FY22 to previous years, is I have 6 new employees at different steps, different experience. So lining them up with previous employees, you'll see big differences in percentages, either increases or decreases.
Great. This is helpful. I don't have any questions about the detailed line items, given that you're basically coming in with a lower budget than you did last year. So that's incredible work. And I know it's tough for everybody to make these kinds of adjustments and change plans and defer things that you may need, but hopefully it gets you what you need, but still comes in with something very favorable for the town. So thanks for all the work on that.
Welcome.
Maureen, Steve?
I don't have any questions. Great job, Chief.
Just one quick question, Chief. You had mentioned the 911 support and incentive grant. Do you see those moving into the future, those being pretty steady? You don't think that there'll be any decrease in the grant funding?
No, we've seen a steady increase over the last 10 years in that funding, especially with our partnership with Hopedale. We're getting ready to start a project with Hopedale. We have a meeting next week where we'll be using some grant funding to upgrade their end of the radio system. So the 911 department has given us that additional grant money to make those investments. So I see that partnership continuing.
Very good. It's always nice to see a budget decrease. It doesn't happen very often.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Derek, is Chief DeFranzo up next?
Yes, he is. And one thing you don't see in your budget binders, only because the warrant wasn't closed when we had issued the 3 binders. Chief DeFranzo will speak to 2 article requests as well. And then you'll see those 2 article requests in writing once the warrant is finalized and released.
Evening. Our budget for the fire department, EMS department, we continue to move it all under one auspice. I've been working with Kenny Costa to kind of streamline what it is that we do here, bringing all of the agencies under one roof so that we can, have one department view versus 3 different agencies. Last year, you saw a fire department budget, an ambulance budget, and emergency management. This year, we've moved the ambulance stuff underneath the fire department, and emergency management, civil defense still sits out on its own. But overall, what you'll see in this budget is wages increased for everybody for the 1.5% wage increase per contract, and by direction of the town manager for all of those non-union employees. Other than that, everything was level funded. For the direction of the town manager and understanding the financial crisis that we don't know where we're going to be in another year or 2. So we've done everything we can to keep everything level funded. I've been very lucky to work with the emergency management department here at the state. And during the COVID pandemic here, during the early times, I did not spend a dime on any of the PPE. I was able to acquire that all from the state. So we've been pretty lucky as far as our needs goes for PPE. We were also very lucky to get a federal grant from the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. They did a supplemental, and we garnered another $4,000+ to again purchase additional PPE and some very high-end facial protection for our staff that could be reused after it's been worn by one employee. We can disinfect it and get it to the next one. So we've been very lucky to get all of those things. So we've done everything we can to maintain our budget as low as we can. I did increase in the expenditures, utilities. I don't know what the electrical rates are gonna be. I don't know what the phone costs are gonna be, so I threw in a almost a $1,400 increase just to cover that should there be an increase. I'm mainly concerned about the electrical. This building is certainly using a lot of energy as we continue to move forward, and based on our HVAC system becoming more and more antiquated, it's needing more and more attention. So I'm sure that's leading to some of the cost expenses for the electrical. We had an increase in the clothing to cover a contract agreement. Under the contract agreement, we need to purchase Class A uniforms for the new employees. So there'll be 3 of them, and it roughly will be about $1,000 a piece. That's why that increased $3,000. The replacement of PPE, which we've been doing for the last few years since I became chief, we did not increase the role of moving one protective set of equipment into the budget and having an article for the rest. We left it the same as last year. So there's only an increase of what it costs to make the material for the PPE to put it all together. That was a $645 increase. As far as our revenues goes, in speaking with Coastal and getting a review of what we've done historically with them over the last 3 previous fiscal years, our guesstimate is about $200,000 in revenues. And obviously that's a decrease from previous years. But what we've seen during this COVID crisis, for some reason, our call volume is down, which is great for the staff because we're not putting them in situations where they may encounter a COVID type patient. But obviously, if we're not going out the door, that means those revenues are not going to come in. So, so in one respect, I'm happy that we're not going out as often as we need to. That means maybe the public is healthier and doesn't need us, but also that means there's a decrease in the revenues because of that. That's pretty much the gist of my budget from last year. Pretty straightforward. I don't know if anybody else has any questions.
Nope, this looks good. Another one. Great job. We definitely appreciate all the work you guys do in pulling these things together. So Steve, Maureen, what questions you guys have?
No, I don't have any questions. Looks good.
Just a couple questions on my side here. With a 1.5 COLA and the 0.5 increase in wages, how do we end up at a 3.2% wage increase? And then I guess going forward, we've got $13,220 increase in overtime. I know that was, I see the explanation, but why would there be such a, a significant increase in that overtime budget, especially if, runs are down, calls are down? Is this the right time to add to that line item?
Okay, so the under our expenses, we have holidays that we have to pay out, and historically that was coming out of overtime. So I have streamlined that. So all of the holiday hours will be now coming under the holiday line item that you see. So that's why that increased almost 28%. So that's why that increased. But we weren't covering all of those hours properly out of the previous budget, and that also includes overtime. This is the first year since I've been here that we now have fully staffed the fire department for every open full-time position that the town has given us. So since I've been here, it'll be almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in August. We've been trying to fill open positions since I got here. So starting in December, we have now completed that step, and everybody's working. Now, in that said, I used to use those open positions to fill, backfill in overtime for when someone took a personal day, sick day, vacation time, whatever it was that they were taking off. I had the ability to use those extra dollars. Well, I don't have that anymore. So in looking at the budget, and I'm sure if you compare ours to the police department and where they've got that line item that talks about filling for earn time, we're short in that particular area. And in talking with Derek, we tried to come up with a number that, let's see what works this year, and then kind of forecast it as we go forward. I really don't have a good picture or a forecast to give you for overtime because we've never had all the positions filled. My last places of employment, we've always had overtime projections that we could go out many years and give a pretty good picture of what we think overtime is going to be. But because we've never had a full complement of staff, there is no image to look at. We're working on new ground here. So that's why those numbers are there. And they are an increase from last year, absolutely. But I think that's because we weren't fully working under where we should be, and we were robbing from Peter to pay Paul. So now it's time to make the budget accurate and correct as best as possible so that you guys understand what it is that we're doing here.
Okay, and then just quickly on page 68, it looks like there's an increase of $11,000. It says payment for ambulance billing company.
All right, so that was a move. So if you look, and again, I don't have the book that you guys have. I apologize. That moved from previous years. It sat under the ambulance division. So that moved under the fire department division. So, and Kenny probably could explain it better than I could, but the ambulance division used to have an account number of 03, I believe. Now we've moved it to a 2 versus a 3. So that's why that got moved, but there's no increase to my budget of $11,000. That's been consistent for the last 3 years of $11,000 to pay our ambulance billing company to manage our accounts and take care of all of our needs.
Okay, so it just moved from a different portion of the budget, a different line item will get zeroed out, and then this will pick up the 11,000 on this line item.
Correct.
Okay. And then the only other question I guess I had, it shows an EMS coordinator and EMS supply coordinator. One's a $4,500 position. It looks like there's a $500 stipend in there.
Yeah, that's the supply coordinator for the EMS supplies. That was a collective bargaining agreement position that was added, so I have to fund that.
Okay.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
No, if nobody's got any questions on the fire EMS side, I can move to the emergency management piece and then to the articles, but I'll do it any way you wish.
I just want to interject right here, just to draw Steve's attention. On page 70, Steve, under account number 5820, you'll see under FY21, $11,000, and under FY22, it's been zeroed out. So that's what you were just previously referencing.
Okay.
So page 70 under the last four will be 5820 ambulance billing. You'll see that $11,000 been zeroed out.
I see, yeah. So the fourth account number down, it's zeroed out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Good. Okay, thanks, Chief. You can move along.
All right, so civil defense, emergency management, no change. Whatever we spent last year, we'll be doing the same thing. The cost for our reverse 911 system remained the same. And we'll keep total expenses at $4,000 for anything that we don't foresee coming up. And then the only other expense we have is $500 for miscellaneous expense for our regional emergency planning committee dues. And then that goes to a regional council made up of, I think we're up to 7 or 8 towns now. Because most of us, and again, Upton's been right in the forefront of a regional process because we know we can't really do this by ourselves. To have a local, so to have a regional approach is certainly the way to go. And other communities have certainly figured that out. So we have a regional approach to emergency management planning. And there's $500 dues for that. And then there's a $2,500 miscellaneous expense line item, but that didn't increase from last year at all either. So everything is level funded under the emergency management civil defense section of the budget.
Great, thank you. Maureen, Steve?
Nope, all set.
All set?
All right.
Okay, and then the 2 articles that you'll see when the warrant's published is one is for 3 sets of PPE, which is the same amount of sets that we did last year. under an article. And again, that only increased the few $100s because of cost increase from the manufacturer. So there was no change in that article other than increase from the costs of the manufacturer. So, and that's that project we've been working on for the last few years of getting everybody up to 2 sets of gear per firefighter, which meets the NFPA standard. And we're pretty close to getting that accomplished. Hopefully in the next 2 years, we'll have everybody with 2 sets, and then we can start the rotation of replacing those sets that are now 5 will move to the reserve set, and the reserve set will be at 10, and then it'll be removed from service like the recommendation is. So we're very close to getting that. So that's one article. And that article is for $11,457.
How many sets of gear would that be?
3. So 5 sets will be purchased out of the budget. 3 sets will be purchased with the article for a total of 8, which is what we've been doing since day one. And then the next article is a request of $24,000 to purchase a fire records management system. And this came to light due to system changes within our EMS software. Our EMS software vendor moved to a different platform and reconfigured its entire software package, and it is not compatible with the previous version. So in order for us to maintain the data, we can either get it in an HTML format, I think is what they called it, or some other CSV type format, or we could pay $800 for a storage locker fee that they would store the data for us. Well, once they started that, I started to look at the total cost of what we pay for that software system, and now we're going to get charged with another $800 a year to maintain our data. Why are we not using systems that are already here in town? We could coordinate better with the police department and the dispatch center, which is something that we need to do. There's a lot of automation that we could get accomplished that the dispatcher already does, but we're not able to capture that data or take advantage of any of that because we're not on their platform. So by this request of $24,000, this gets us into and working with the records management system that they have and their dispatch system, which is an IMC product. And that's a very heavily used product by most of the police departments in Massachusetts. They seem to really like that particular product. For us on the fire side, it certainly, puts all of our records into one system for the town versus having, the fire EMS stuff in one bucket and the police stuff in another one. We can try to kind of consolidate all of our records into one system and manage it better, and also be able to look things up and coordinate. And like I said, automate some of the things that the dispatch center does right now. If this article is approved, there is a yearly fee. And I apologize, I don't have that. Give me 2 seconds here. For that. The yearly fee after that will be about $1,900. Right now we spend, like I said, we're up to about $3,800 with the current software that we're using now. So with a $24,000 investment, I can cut our yearly fee down to about $1,900 and be more streamlined and have some systems automated that, that's really where we need to go anyway. So.
Is this a common practice to integrate fire and police software? So would you be integrated, or would you just be using the same software?
Well, we would be integrated. However, the police see their records management system, and I would see the fire records management system. There's commonality with the dispatch record system, where when the dispatch receives a call, they do data entry for the call, what it is, the assets that go, and all of those types of things. When right now, when they're done with that, they can assign the report to an officer to finish. And all of the data is already pre-filled of everything that the dispatch center did. Right now, I don't have that. So if we move to this, when a fire call goes out and the dispatch enters in all of the basic information of who the caller was and all the data that they put in during the whole call to include capturing a little better the response of the apparatus versus the way they do it now. They just do a log note with the new system and upgrades. They can just click on the piece of equipment that goes and it will automatically log the time. At the end, they can, again, like they do for the police department side, they can do it on the fire side, assign it to someone here to finish up the report. One of the things that I noticed here was because of the way that dispatch does the time records for us, there's no seconds captured. And at my last place, a number of years prior, there was a case that got brought up questioning why it took a length of time for an emergency vehicle to get to a particular address. Well, if you don't count seconds, if something happens at 7 minutes and 58 seconds, and then the apparatus doesn't arrive until 9 minutes and 2 seconds, well, you can see that's not really the right time. It didn't really take almost 3 minutes. It took less than 2. But because the seconds aren't captured, there was no way for anybody to recognize that data. So also by going to this will also bring us easier to capture seconds, because again, all you do is click the apparatus and it will automatically capture all of that data in the background from the PC that they're using.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm all set.
Steve, is that just software or is there any hardware that the town would get, or is that just software, off-site software services?
That's just software. I worked with Chief Bradley on this thought, and also the provider IMC, and the hardware that they have in place right now is more than capable of adding these modules. That's what they're called, as modules. They can add these modules onto the current system that they have now. So there'd be no need for any other infrastructure upgrades or hardware. It would just be software and training.
Okay. And a quick question, maybe Kenny Costa may have this answer. So this year, you're spending, you said, about $4,500 for software, and that will be reduced to $1,900 in the future. So where in the budget, were those, is that the right number?
Well, yeah, it's going to be hidden away. In my budget, it's we expense it out of the ambulance support supplies section, and it'll say image trend on it. So that when you look it up, that's where it'll say, and then you'll also see the extra increase of 800.
Okay. So we'll see that decrease next year, is that right?
Yes.
So under ambulance image.
Well, it would be under, if you're looking at the specific budget, it will be under, let's see if I can find it quickly.
Is it ambulance supplies, Chief?
Yeah, so it's going to be under account number ending 5421. So right now that sits at 38,000, and I
Yes.
level funded it from last year. I'm hoping we just keep it level funded for next year. And if we can decrease it, we will. But you know, I don't know what costs are going to be next year for EMS supplies either. Again, because our call volume's been down, we haven't had to buy, and I'll keep it simple. We haven't had to buy the Band-Aids and medications. But if the call volume starts to go up, I can tell you right now, gloves, masks, gowns, all of that stuff has gone up in cost exponentially. I'm not projecting that to come down. I think the suppliers are going to keep it at that price range, and it's never coming back. So I'm not going to be shocked if I have to increase that as time goes on, just because of the change in times, and you know, the suppliers and manufacturers want to get the biggest buck for the product that they're making and selling. So.
Okay, very good. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. All right, thank you very much. Anything else from your perspective, Chief?
No, I have nothing for me. If anybody's got questions or concerns, certainly let me know.
No, I think we're in good shape. Again, thanks, and we'll see you around. Thank you. Okay. Derek, finance up next. Kenny?
Yes, Finance Department. So this is, again, after the reorganization, this is a compilation of the Assessor's Office, the Treasurer Collector's Office, and the Town Accountant's Office. So all of those former budgets are now have been merged into one account known as the Finance Department.
Yes, that's correct. So if you look at page 59, you'll see 100% increase in that budget. So it's now Department 133, but then you'll see in the following pages, Department 135, the Town Accountant, 145 for Treasurer Collector, and then Department 141, Assessors. The fiscal year 22 budget, those are all been zeroed out. So you'll see 100% decrease in those budgets. But on page 56, with the budget overview, what we've done is we've consolidated all those amounts. So the overall budget, it's increasing by 5,308 at 1.55%. And if you look at the wages, we're going from 6 positions to 5 positions. So when you look at all the fractions, I calculated in the previous year we had about 3.85, and then in fiscal year 22 we're just under 4 FTEs. The payroll clerk position has been eliminated, so that's the position going from 6 to 5. So we just feel with the reorganization we'll be fully staffed. If you may recall, from fiscal year 18 to 20. We've had year-end transfers, budget transfers, to cover shortfalls in the treasurer collector's budget in wages. So we just feel it's fully staffed, and we're not anticipating any year-end transfers, for this department. So no surprises is what I want to relay to everybody. Does anybody have any questions on wages? I know there's a lot of moving parts, but next year and future years you'll be seeing a lot more of a just a one uniform. So rather than 3 departments, it'll be all one department, all in one place. And we're still segregation of duties for each department, but here it's all in one budget, it's all in one place for everybody to see.
I think
Okay.
what we're probably going to notice is when you try to capture changes in wages, take for instance, finance director, town accountant wages, people are going to have questions as far as what that was to what that now became. So that's something I think we're going to have to be mindful of when we go to town meeting. And when we, capture and display what the wages are after the summary budget, I think that's something that people are going to want to see, may raise questions too. So if there's a position that is going to be eliminated, that will go to 0, but then some of these wages are going to show, significant increase, maybe a 25% increase or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at wages. We're looking at an increase, right now at 6,983. However, we still have 1 vacant position, and we budgeted that at the midpoint. So that hasn't been finalized yet. I'm expecting, once this is all finalized, I'm expecting, a very, either 0 to a very small increase in this wages line. Right now, like I mentioned, it's just under $7,000, but that's because we're, this is the transition year. I always felt fiscal year 21 is a transition year, and we're expecting fiscal year 22 to be fully staffed. But we just wanted to be conservative, and we budgeted the assistant treasurer collector position at the midpoint.
Okay.
I'll move over to expenses. The town accountant's expense for OPEB, there's a decrease of $3,750. That's because this fiscal year we had a full valuation, and next year it's going to be a roll forward. So there's a decrease in that. In the treasurer collector's office, there's actually a decrease of $700, and that's due to software license fees. And the Board of Assessors, there's an increase of $2,775, and it's a reval year, and there's also an additional cost of the utility appraisal required by the state. You also see debt service. I mean, those are fixed costs. I mean, those are based off the debt service schedule, and we're also looking at an unemployment compensation, an increase of $500. We were seeing a small increase in the rate. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
I know that when we were looking at doing the finance department reorg in July and we first started talking about it, one of the concerns we had, and I think Steve, you in particular were mindful of, is adding expenses to the department as we made all these changes. And I just want to be clear, right? It seems like, based on the changes you're making to FTEs, and it looks like you're eliminating some roles here, that we have been able to keep those costs in line. Is it your sense that there is an increase, isn't an increase, that it's flat, that it's lower in terms of the overall cost of us running the finance department based on the fact that we've reorganized into one department?
Were you asking me or are you asking Kenny?
I would say Kenny, only because you can probably summarize it. And then basically, Steve, I want to make sure that you're getting a clear answer to your question. I'm obviously curious as well, but I want to make sure that when we walk away, we can either say, hey, you know what? We did what we said we were going to do, which is reorganize the finance department, and it's not going to cost us an extra $20,000 a year in wages because we're paying some higher paid position or what have you. Because I think that was the concern, Steve. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was part of it, wasn't it?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of the context for my question, Kenny, is, has that happened, or are we keeping the wages consistent with what they've been? Are they going up? Are they going down? Or what's your view?
Well, as I mentioned earlier about the fractions, I mean, I went through and I looked at fiscal year 20 under the previous model, and I was looking at 3.85 FTEs. And in fiscal year 22, we're proposing 3.98 FTEs. I mean, just to break it down, I mean, the town accountant's office, my office, I'm a 0.5. The assistant assessor is a 1.0. And under the treasurer collectors, we're looking at 2.48. And I also want to remind you, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we had year-end in fiscal year 18, we had a year-end transfer of $5,500 for a budget transfer. In fiscal year 19, we had a $5,000 transfer year-end. In fiscal year 20, we had a $4,700 transfer at year-end. So what I'm proposing here, or what we're proposing here, is we're looking to fully fund. And I understand there's an increase of $6,983. However, this is a transition year. We're looking at fiscal year 22 to be fully funded. I think there's going to be, I mean, my best guess, I would say, estimate that there'll be additional savings. We're looking at this as worst case scenario with the $6,983. I don't expect that to be the number once this is all said and done, once it's finalized. We just want to be conservative. I mean,
yeah, no, totally. I appreciate that. And I think that, so if we're looking at that, right, 6,900 number, and you say $5,000 a year, we've been doing in year-end transfers, right? You're talking about a couple of $1,000s, and that's a conservative number. So it seems like we're in decent enough shape there. I think the challenge we're going to have here is, to Steve's point, that we don't have the years side by side. So that's why I sort of said, like, okay, summarize this, because that's what people are going to want to know. Like, is it going up? Is it going down? Where are we? And it's going up by a couple $1,000s, and that's the extent of it. And it's still a conservative estimate. So, and you guys have saved us a ton of money on finance costs. So there's that too. So good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brett, could I ask a quick question?
This is not an open discussion, but sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm asking, I'm making a comment from the perspective of the town meeting line item process that we go through with the budget. So that's the reason why I just want to make a comment as follow-up to Steve's comment. What would be really helpful is, as you were talking about certain line items that have gone up a lot, others have gone down a lot, if that could be explained to the town meeting members before we go through the line item process of doing the holding, we would minimize the number of holds, because then people would know ahead of time, oh, this is why that went up 50%, because something else went down 50%. You follow me? So either Kenny or Paul Flaherty or whomever wants to do this, if you could do that before we go through the line item process, going through the budget, that would minimize the number of holds that people have. To explain it beforehand as opposed to afterwards. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if you look at page 56 up top, the overview, that gives you totals if the finance department was, one department for fiscal year 20 and 21. So I just wanted to, to add. So fiscal year 20, that was pre-reorganization. Fiscal year 21, that's the transition year. And fiscal year 22 is the new proposed. So those are the increases for wages, salaries, and also expenses. And again, this is for all three departments on a consolidated basis for those 3 years. So if you just want to look at totals, and again, the total amount from fiscal year 21 to 22, it's 1.55% increase. We're talking about $5,308. And as I mentioned, those 3 years, we've increased about $5,000 at year end for the budget. So,
yeah.
I understand.
That's not quite my point, though.
I think, Mr. Moderator, your point is more of a general point that, when we move things around within the budget and something goes up by 100% and then later there's an offset somewhere that goes down by 100%, rather than making people look for that or having to explain it, we could somehow highlight those up front, whether it's on a handout or a worksheet or something, so that somebody's not saying, hey, why is this $11,000 cost showing up in the fire department budget, and say, oh, well, actually it's over here as a subtraction, but you just didn't see that because it's 3 pages away. So what we'll do, what I think we can do is, Kenny and Derek, we can figure out the best way to do this, but really look for those line items that are just going to sort of be gotchas that are just going to waste time. As people don't see the whole thing at once. If we can go through, if there's 5 or 6 of those things, put them on a worksheet, on a handout or whatever, and that'll just help us save time rather than having, 250 people there looking at these things while we do accounting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can work with the department heads to identify those changes, those consolidations. And every year we've done a certain level of consolidation. And so I think, collectively we could put a 1-page handout together.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
In the past, some of that has been explained in either the cover letter or some of the graphs, the supplementary pages the last few years where we've had pie charts and things of that nature. But part of the reason I bring these things up is hoping that if people are listening or this conversation that we're having, some of these things, you hope that repetition will kind of get those ideas out, in theory. So.
We also could just have a meeting with 2 or 3 people before the town meeting, which we try to do with the finance committee public hearing, but that doesn't work. So maybe we just need to schedule one-on-one meetings with the 2 or 3 people in town that have the questions.
That's probably one of the most sparsely attended meeting is the FinCom budget presentation meeting, which is about 5 or 6 days in advance of the annual. So.
Yep, we all been there. So, all right, I think next up is the town manager, Derek.
Great.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't know if there are any other questions for Kenny.
I just want to thank everybody. There's no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenny. This is awesome. It's been a ton of work to pull all these departments together, and do the consolidation and obviously putting together the whole budget as well as just for the finance department. So your leadership and work is very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Town Manager.
Sure. So thanks, everyone. And yeah, I want to echo that. This, I would say, is certainly the most challenging budget that I have been a part of since, my almost 4 years here in town. And, a lot of the credit goes to the department heads trying to scrutinize their own budgets and follow the script that we laid out, and they adhere to it. And, I would say that in order for us to balance this year's budget, to a certain degree, we had to balance it on the employees' backs and not provide the typical wage increase that we do year after year. But I think they all understood, given the economy that we're in, and they were willing to work with the administration in doing it. So I appreciate not just the department heads' efforts, but certainly all the town employees and their understanding and what we're trying to accomplish here. So with that being said, starting on page 30 is the Board of Selectmen Town Manager budget presentation. You'll notice in this that it also includes our legal line items, our insurance items, our pension obligations, and any miscellaneous items. Overall, the budget increased by approximately 6%, which equates to $147,943. And so in large part, you'll see here when you read kind of the highlights in the budget overview, again, 1.5% COLA for the 4 employees that are assigned to this office. The town planner's position, I think, and as we talked about at the last budget discussion, is probably going to raise some eyebrows, only because what we're doing here is we're following the same playbook we did with the intermunicipal agreement with the conservation agent, in that we're fully funding the town planner position in our operating budget. And what I think we have to draw everyone's attention to is that, and you'll see that at the bottom of the page, that there's an offset of $40,000 from the town of Boylston. So we submit an invoice quarterly to the town of Boylston that will then go into the general fund to cover those costs. So again, Steve, you had mentioned this. This is probably something that folks are going to wonder why, we've increased the town planner budget by 100%, and it's because of the IMA. And then moving on, some of the major budget drivers that we don't have any control over were the other causes of a 6% increase. So very conservatively, we budgeted 5. And so we're kind of ballparking this 5% for health insurance increases. Normally it's usually a little bit north of that, but Sandy has had preliminary conversations with the folks at Maya, and so we're somewhere in the 4 to 6-ish range. And so we're aiming for 5%, knowing that we will be able to cover any deficit if those were to arise. And then as you can see here, that our pension obligations actually are lower this year than previous years. So although 9% is a steep increase year after year, last year I think it was 11%, and the year before that was about 12%. So we're doing a little bit better this year, but you can see that it's close to a $60,000 increase in just that one line item. And so those are really the big line item changes in this year's budget. The legal account, we kept that flat. We kept all of our ordinary maintenance accounts flat, like utilities and any other budget lines like street lighting, weights and measures, things of that nature. We've kept flat, knowing that although it varies year to year, if we need to, we'll have to do some type of year-end transfer if necessary. But pending any questions, I'll turn this back to the chair.
Derek, can I add one thing?
Sure.
So regarding the pension assessment, I just want to remind everybody, by making that payment on 7/1, we saved $14,000. So it would be much higher if we didn't make that payment on 7/1. Because as I mentioned, the last meeting, there's other options, other payment options with the pension assessment. So I just wanted to remind everybody. Thank you.
Now, Kenny, that's still going to be on a separate warrant article. We'll vote that separately, whichever warrant article that appears to be, correct?
Pension?
No,
No,
no.
that's in the budget.
Okay. Sorry,
The only separate warrant article we have that is included in the budget is the roads article. And there's been some conversations about whether or not that is still necessary. So we're talking about that internally, whether or not we should keep that as a sitting article or just include it in the budget as a recurring item.
Right now, for Worcester County retirement, we typically pay that on a warrant article, correct?
No, it's in the budget.
No.
Years ago we did. The last few years we haven't. We've included as part of the operating budget.
Okay.
Okay, Maureen, do you have any questions?
Nope. I looked it all over. I mean, I can see where things go up and go down, and I know all about the fixed costs, and there's not too much you can do about that.
So I guess the quick, one other quick question, where we're showing the town planner's salary in total, when we show the offset of that money coming in, those, we're not levying the full 77,500. We're levying 77.5 minus the expense coming back in. I shouldn't say the expense, the revenue coming back in.
So the revenue that comes in, that's the offset. So there's the Boylston portion and then there's the town's portion.
I think what he's asking is that number, is the 77 number inclusive of what we get from Boylston, or does what we get from Boylston reduce that 77 to a lower number?
So the 77 is 100% of the salary, and then the offset is in the revenue, which is the 40,000. So that's the offset. So if there was no offset, then the town would have to pay 100% of it.
So it's $37,000 less, Steve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess what my concern is, does that 37 come in as free cash, or does it come off what we levy? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Let's just take, for instance, in the case of, let's just take trash bags, for instance. We levy the full cost of trash. Trash bag revenue just comes into free cash. So, you know, how is that 77K? We shouldn't be levying the full 77. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is that 40K or 35,000, whatever comes in from Boylston, does that offset the total levy of the 77,000, or is that money coming in to free cash?
So if I could answer that. So we have to show 100% of the expenses on the expenditure side. We can't show it as a negative. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, that's why there's a increase to the departmental revenue amount in fiscal year 22. So that's the offset. So I mean, I think maybe the way I think Steve's thinking about it is, you know, 77,000 minus the 40,000, it should reduce the expense. But we have to show 100% of the expense. The offset would be on the revenue as a like a local receipt coming in. So the local receipt came in, so the rest of it would be raised through revenue. So the town's portion, which is similar to what we did a year ago. So there's no change to that.
So Kenny, does the 40,000 come in all at once? Or I thought I heard you say it comes in what, monthly?
We bill them quarterly.
Quarterly. So that is earmarked for salaries, correct? Which would be the offset to the salary line.
No, so it would be on the revenue side. So again, so the expenditures, we have to show 100%. And if you remember that summary sheet, let me see if I can find the page quickly.
Kenny, I think the question is the selectman asking, when we bring the money in, where is it going? Is it going to the general fund and then shows up as free cash at the end of the year?
No, so what it does, it balances the budget. So we have, 77,000 or 70,000. We have to balance that on the revenue side. It's not free cash. What it is, it's a departmental receipt that comes in to offset the difference from a year ago. So it's just, we have to,
Would that be called other funding sources?
it would be a local receipt, departmental revenue. It's a local receipt. So it's not one-time money. So, and it's all general fund.
So
Okay.
Steve, it's not necessarily being raised.
So
We're still raising what we need to raise to balance the budget, but in order to make this position whole, you'll see this on the revenue side through the intermunicipal agreement with the town of Boylston.
I guess just from an accounting standpoint, I'm just concerned / curious. So it really comes in almost, from an accounting standpoint, works the same way that, let's just say, the 911 grant money comes in, where the PD is able to take that money in and expense it out.
No, so if I could, the PD, that's through a grant. So there's a grant fund that's part of that. So on a reimbursement basis for reporting. However, this is a intermunicipal agreement, and we have similar agreements with Blackstone for nursing. Also the police department, if you mentioned, or earlier, if you heard Chief Bradley mention, there's an intermunicipal agreement as well. So it's no different than the other existing intermunicipal agreements that we have. So it's all general fund, it's all general fund revenue. So we have to balance the budget, we have to balance expenditures and revenues. So the increase in expenditures or into this line is to general fund revenue into local receipts. So there's an offset. It's not a decrease to expenditures because we have to show 100% of the expenditure in the general fund. We can't net it, or that's not the proper way to present it in the general ledger or in our financials.
So it works kind of like the school resource officer, the way that comes.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
That helps, Steve?
Yes.
It's really important that this stuff is as clear as it can be, right? Because if it's not clear to us, it's going to be awfully hard to make it clear to 250 people. So as long as people understand that, we're in good shape. Okay. What else, Kenny?
So
It looked like Kelly may have had a comment.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't see.
Yeah, Steve, I just wanted, if you remember because I think your concern was raise and appropriate. If you think about when we do the tax, when you make the decision on classification, I review the recap with you. And there's always the total amount that we have to raise and appropriate, and it's offset by local receipts. And that 40,000 we're getting from Boylston is in that, so it lowers the amount that we have to raise and appropriate. So the tax rate is set on that lower amount.
Got it. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Kenny? No.
And I also just wanted to add, there is no, so as far as this budget, it's, as I mentioned, it's, we have expenditures and we have revenues, and it's a balanced budget. We're not using, there's 0% of free cash stabilization. There's no one-time revenues to balance this budget.
Yeah.
So everything that we're expending, we're anticipating those revenues to come in. So we have a balanced budget, which during these times, that's a great thing. Everybody should be, happy, with that. With that being said, thank you.
Any other questions for Derek from the town manager report and budget?
No.
Okay, so I think we are ready for the town manager report, Derek.
Okay, short report this evening. The first thing, I'm happy Paul is still on to report that one one of the last times he was in, he asked permission to apply for the local rapid recovery program. That's a grant program that provides technical assistance to municipalities to work with their businesses to help them work through this economy given the pandemic. We received word that we received that grant award. So we'll be working with the state in the near future and the businesses on this program. So, great work by Paula to be able to bring that resource locally. Additionally, I just wanted to remind folks that the governor did pass his budget or submit his budget proposal. Thankfully, he increased UGA, so local government aid, by 3.5%. Keep in mind that our budget's proposal had a decrease in this other account by 10%. So we could be looking at, depending on what the House does, upwards of 13.5% increase in that line item itself, given what we budgeted and given what they're proposing. So the 3.5% represents approximately $21,000 back to the town. And I think the reduction was approximately $60,000. So, we could see a turnaround for $80,000. And then last, I just wanted to mention that the Board of Health continues to work with the state on vaccinating our first responders. So this week they're going to hold, I think it's their 5th clinic in a row over at Nipmunk. They will be providing the second dose to our first responders. And as a reminder, again, a lot of hard work by both Diane and Trish to bring this clinic to Upton. It could have been hosted in many other communities, and they were able to convince the state to have it here in town, which certainly helps our first responders. And that's not only servicing the town of Upton, but 6 neighboring communities as well. So once they finish the vaccinating first responders, they are already in conversations of holding public clinics for the phase 2 vaccination efforts. So we'll keep the community posted on that as that arises, because we have received phone calls at town hall as to how some of our senior population can get vaccinated without having to drive to Gillette. So as soon as we have that, we'll certainly advertise that far and wide. And then last, I just want to bring up that, everybody knows we had a big storm last night into this morning. Approximately 16 inches fell to the ground. And so overall things went well, but the DPW is already preparing for a weekend storm they're expected to hit on Sunday. And then there is also talks of a third storm hitting sometime a few days thereafter. So the DPW, although they've had the month of January off, started off the month of February very busy, and will continue to do this over the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
Good stuff from my perspective. Any questions?
No, good stuff from my perspective too.
Yep, same here, no questions.
Okay,
All good.
thank you. Anything else? So next up, we have closing comments. Any unanticipated discussion items that we wanted to bring up before we adjourn?
Yes, I do have one.
Okay, shoot.
All right. Kind of touched on this at the last meeting. This was brought to light after the discussion that came up regarding Governor's Landing. I would sponsor, or like to sponsor, an article to extend the sewer line from 3 Milford Street up past Brook Street. As we all know, there's a TIP project in the future. We don't know if it's 2 years, 3 years away, whatever that number is, but we do know we need to be ahead of that. We know that if they're going to do whatever asphalt reclamation project they're going to do on Route 140, we're not going to be able to open up the road. So I think this is an important investment in the community. We know we're in, I consider us to be in a very weak position with respect to our business composition of our tax revenue. So I think this is an opportunity to get that sewer on the other side of Brook Street. I would not propose bringing it, as was mentioned at that meeting, I wouldn't propose bringing it up the hill by any stretch. And frankly, I think it's a little peculiar that our water ends a half a mile or maybe a quarter of a mile beyond our sewer. So I think that's kind of a peculiarity. But I would also say, I don't support in any way the Governor's Landing project the way that it was proposed to us. But I do think it's important to get that sewer on the other side of Brook Street, especially with a TIP project in the near future. So thoughts, I guess thoughts from my fellow colleagues. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, it's the cost, what the cost estimate would be. Would Dennis Westgate be able to handle that, Derek? Give us an estimated cost of what it would be to bring the sewer line to Brook Street?
Yes, Dennis certainly would be able to look at that cost estimate. As he presented before, he was working with Ty and Bond, and I believe the conversation we had with Fafford was about $3 million. So that was probably a little bit more robust than what I think Mr. Materian is talking about, but that project alone was about $3 million. So, but I can certainly talk to Dennis and try to get a ballpark of what the cost would be just for sewer from, what did we say, 3 Milford, all the way up to Brook Street? Is that where we're stopping, at Brook Street?
Yeah, I would think we'd want to get, one house beyond Brook Street. If that's in fact where the TIP project is going to end, I'd want to be on the other side of that. And yes, Derek, as you mentioned, the proposal, I think Dennis had mentioned, that was water and sewer, and I think they were talking $3 million. But if it's the loose estimates people always talk about are $1 million a mile, and I think we're talking about a distance there, where again, we're on the other side of the bridge in front of the church to Brook Street. I would say, I'm pretty good with mileage. My business enforces that I have to be good with mileage. That's less than a quarter of a mile. So I'm looking at that project as, maybe, and again, this is a layman's terminology, layman's guess, $300,000. I think it's money well spent, depending what's in the ground. I don't know if there's ledge or anything along those lines, but I think it's important to get ahead of that TIP, and I think it's an important investment in this community. We spend money on all kinds of things, so.
Were you also looking for the water line too to be included as a warrant article? Or just the sewer?
Just the sewer. I believe water is already over the hill. When I say the hill, it's past Brook Street, and water goes down to the base of the hill in front of the Gasco fuel station.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure water ends somewhere in and along there. I can't, in fact, I think there's a hydrant. It may even be right in front of Gasco, if I remember correctly. So water ends there, but again, sewer ends, significantly further back on 140. And it would be a better call by Dennis to say where exactly it should stop, but I think that, it's important. There's homes there on the left-hand side, there's swamp behind there, so I think you definitely would pick up customers just from the residential side, in my humble opinion.
Right, and you're thinking of the timing, because I know when we spoke with the folks from Governor's Landing, we sort of said, okay, we'll take this back and think about it, and they were going to go back to the planning board and try to get some more finalized description of what they were going to do in terms of the plan, and they were going to come back to us. So I don't think that, I feel like the part of this that involves Governor's Landing, where they're going to pay for half of it or whatever, is really a separate conversation, right? Because you're saying, Steve, that the reason you're thinking we should do this now is because the road's going to be paved over by the TIP project. Is that right?
I think it's twofold. In my mind, Governor's Landing has been a discussion for at least 15 years.
Yeah.
And again, in my mind, it's also a peculiarity that you would have water end at one location and the sewer end, again, over a quarter mile difference. But I think it shows some cooperation towards that project. But I think the more important factor is we want to get ahead of that TIP project. We want to make sure that we have that infrastructure taken care of for the TIP project.
Yeah, so I think it's critical, right? Because isn't there like a 5-year moratorium on carving up a new road that gets put in by the state? Is that 5 years or 3 years, Derek? Do you know?
Usually, once they repave a road, they won't let you cut into the road for 5 years.
For 5 years. So there's, I mean, there would have to be, I would assume, I mean, we've looked at the tie and bond analysis, but I would think before they would ever start that project, similar to what we did on Hopkinton Road, we would go through and say, all right, from, William Street to Brook Street, look at all the infrastructure that's under that pavement and figure out what changes we need to make and what upgrades we need to make, along that whole stretch. And I would expect that there would be, a project or a plan to do all of that work. And I would expect that this extension would be a part of that consideration, because I'm guessing there are other things under the pavement between William Street and Brook Street that need work that we would want to do before it got sort of zipped up for 5 years.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, there's portions of that. I know Paul would know this as well, but there's portions of the sewer line that are not on 140 that ideally should be. But again, that's probably a separate conversation. But I'm thinking that, I think you're right. I think we're going to have to rebuild a whole lot more than just that one section. But I think that, what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage of doing it in steps? If we were to do a section of it this year, and then a year or two later, you do the remaining section, for an advantage or a disadvantage to doing it in that way.
Yeah. I mean, other than trying to save a few $100,000, I think, right, we have to decide what's the best use of taxpayers' $300,000, right? And if it's extending a sewer line a quarter of a mile to a couple of houses, then that's a case that I guess you're making, or can be made, right? So that's why I'm just mindful of the timing of this, given all of the other priorities that are coming up across town. But I really do think this is a Dennis special, right? Like he's the water, sewer, road infrastructure expert. I'd love to have him chime in, and then depending on what his recommendation is or what we want to do, right? Like we can reopen the warrant at any point if we want to add this article, right? Like that's not going to stop us. So that's not really.
My guess is he's going to want to do a much larger portion of that project. Would be my guess.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul. I've now switched my screen from speaker view so I can see people raising their hand. So now I can see you raising your hand. Go ahead, Mr. Flaherty.
To one of Steve's points that it's unusual that there's water goes to Mobico, but sewer doesn't. Well, there's many places in this town where water goes and sewer does. I believe you have 1,400 water customers and only about 600 sewer customers. So it's not unusual with that in that situation. However, as most of you know, it's very unusual that Mr. Matali and I could agree on many subjects. But to extend, I'm not saying I'm agreeing 100%, but in concept, I do agree, because let me put my community center building committee hat on and say it's imperative, it's part of the building project to connect it to town sewer. So we still, if this project goes through, we're still going to have to get from the site there by the first driveway down to that, the first manhole, right by Holy Angels. So
why don't we have a conversation with, right, is it Jim Brochu, the chair of that, you're on that building committee, right? And sort of get together and say, hey, between Dennis and the community center and the warrant, like what's the right approach here? Because I'm sure that that's part of what you guys are talking about on the building committee.
We're working out costs. We're still in the cost development phase to find out what that cost is, you know. But I mean, to Steve's point, if you only go to Brook Street, you may pick up the one house at the corner on the town side of Brook Street. And there's what, 3 or 4 houses past Brook Street on that right-hand side of the road. And then, then you got the swamp. So as far as paying for it, you still have, you can still go to retained earnings and whatever you want from your enterprise fund, I suppose. But
it makes a lot of sense to me to package it potentially as part of doing the community center, right? If you're looking to spend several $1 million on a community center, then it makes sense to say, hey, you know what, we're going to include whatever you said, Steve, $300,000 in this budget and finance it through a bond issuance as part of getting a community center. Like, that makes a lot more sense to me, because you're linking it with an investment in the town that the people are asking for versus an unrelated, we want to spend $500,000 to, put in 150 feet of sewer line to nowhere. So it's like, I think if it's the right thing to do, we can do it in the context of the community center. But let's talk to Dennis. Let's talk to Derek. Maybe you can talk to Jim and just sort of see what the right and best strategy is to try to get to Steve's end goal.
Okay, so just keep in mind that Dennis will be on the agenda at the next meeting to present the DPW budget. So this, unless you want a separate meeting specifically for this purpose, that would be an opportunity to ask him some of these types of questions. And then we'd have to set up a separate time to meet with Jim and the building committee to get their thoughts on what they plan on doing for sewer connections. So I'm not sure how you want to play it. Do you want to have a collective meeting with Jim and Dennis, or do you want to take advantage of Dennis on the agenda at the next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just suggesting that you talk to Dennis and tell him what Steve's question is, but whatever.
I know. I mean, I plan on talking to Dennis anyways, but I just, if you just want me to communicate that back to the board.
Right, or Steve can call Dennis, or I can call Jim, or right. Like, I don't know that we need to have a big meeting about it. I just think we understand what Steve's looking for, what the intent is. We can reopen the warrant article anytime we want, but if Brochu and the community center are already thinking, hey, we've got this line item that we're getting estimated to include the sewer, then that covers the cost, and we don't have to add another warrant article. So,
I mean, I would think if we just had a separate conversation, a separate agenda item with Dennis, we could just tackle this quick, just get a rough idea. Because from what I'm told, there's other issues with sewer in and around the common. So if in and around the common, there's some issues there, this may be a chance to, it's not a situation of, hey, we're just going to burn up 400,000. It's we're going to check 2 or 3 boxes for that 400, 300, 500, whatever that number is. And then, as Paul mentioned, there may be retained earnings. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would just say we talk to Dennis and see what he thinks.
Yeah, and I think we should do it because this, you can tell, Derek, that this is going to turn into a whole discussion. So I don't know that we want to try to pin it into a budget conversation. It feels like it should be its own discussion, and see if we can get Brochu here and just hash it out before we show up at town meeting and try to do it on the town meeting floor, because it's going to get really confusing really fast, particularly when there's all this misinformation out there about intrusion and infiltration happening up behind the country super with the sewer main that runs along Centerbrook. And that's been something that people have talked about for the better part of 10 years, except Ty and Bod did their infiltration study, and that's not a particularly sensitive area. At least that's the way Dennis described it to us when he shared that report with us. So there shouldn't be any uncertainty. There shouldn't be any rumors or innuendo. We should have Dennis present exactly what the facts are about the sewer infrastructure in the common, what it would take to extend it to the community center, and what it would take to extend it up to the foot of Brook Street, and then have a discussion with Dennis, have a discussion with Jim, and just decide what we're going to do so that we're all on the same page before we finalize the warrant.
Because I think ultimately, and it would be helpful if we could get a map beforehand so we could understand that. Does that mean that the sewer only runs behind those homes? It does not run down 140? You know, if it does, then that would be the time again to correct that problem. So, you know,
And
that's what I've been told.
I was gonna say, Steve, I think the one critical part of this will be if you can capture any and all of your questions that you want to have answered, because there shouldn't be any open questions going into town meeting about any of these things, because you know it's gonna come up, right? So it's just like we did with the Grove Street purchase, right? Like, let's show up with the environmental study, with the soil study. You know, let's not get into any, you know, let's bring the data to the meeting so we've got the facts. So anything you can think of that we might want to bring to that conversation, Steve, the ones you mentioned are great. Like, let's just get a map and let's have red circles on the parts where there's infiltration that needs to be resolved as part of a 140 tip project, or, you know, whatever that is. We want to make sure we've got that absolutely crystal clear before we go to talk about these issues in the town meeting.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, that was a good one. Thank you very much, Steve. Anything else that we need to cover before we wrap up? Okay.
I have
All right.
nothing else.
I will take a motion.
I will make
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
make a motion that we adjourn the meeting. Stephen Mattelli and I.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Thank you all very much. Have a great week.
You
care,
also.
Mike.
Yep.
See you later.
Great
Night.
week.